first of all, thank you very much for your time, commissioners. It's scheduled till 12 o'clock. I will be surprised if we go close to that. We really have one agenda item on the agenda here, and it's our natural cycle here every year of going through and reevaluating the prioritization process, asking questions if we want to make changes. And Ben's going to lead us through that discussion here as agenda item number one. The second one was, one of the things that I know I appreciated, the most about our commission meetings, and other than getting together with all you fine people, was the opportunity to go around the state and tour some of our construction projects and to kind of see what was going on. And so since we haven't been able to do that for a while, we've asked our region offices and Elizabeth's office here centrally to see if they can't do something to put together a virtual tour of our construction projects. I have not seen it. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but Jason guarantees that it's going to go well, and he's going to help run that item here. So I'm not sure if Jason has seen it yet, but we'll do that as an item. We do have. I want to make. I know the commissioners have been contacted, but I still want to make the announcement here, since this is a public meeting, and Jason got done watching it. Okay. This is a public meeting, so I do want to make an announcement and give Brian Adams a chance here. So Brian Adams, has announced his retirement from the department, and yes, that's my feeling too, Natalie and Lou. On August 28th will be Brian's last day. Wow. And Brian, I'll give him a chance to say a few things here when I'm done here. But Brian is, when he started the department, I had a chance to work with him when he first started, and you could tell he was one of those outstanding people and was going to make a big mark on the department. And he had a lot of significant stops along his career, and I'll allow it if he wants to mention that. That's up to him. So Brian's a big loss for the department. He's done a great job for us. He's finishing his career up as our Region 2 director. And we've announced a couple shifts. It does leave a vacancy, and I'm sure everyone's waiting for the next musical chairs exercise. But so Lisa Wilson has agreed. She served as deputy director down there before, and Lisa Wilson has agreed to move down to Region 2 and become the director down in Region 2. And I know how difficult it is for Lisa. She made close contacts at Region 1. It's a very close community up there. And so leaving that is hard, but Lisa will do a great job in 2. And then Rob White, our operations director, and Rob reports to the commission all the time on our zero fatalities. Our operations area it's the group that has divisions that are mixed up and has all kinds of stuff in it. And so it takes a lot of different expertise. But back when we had the earthquake and when we first got into the COVID-19 area, stood up as our incident commander and really helped run, our incident command operation for the department. Did an outstanding job. And Rob will be moving up to, I guess I should say, will be moving up to Region 1 as the new Region 1 director. And so they're all probably now having a foot in each job. I imagine Rob's talking to Lisa and trying to figure out what's the hot topic and through things. And Lisa's benefit is Carmen, her deputy director, is there, and so that will help Lisa's transition in there. So it leaves the operations director position empty. That is what we call an engineer manager 4 position. That's the equivalent to a region director position. So we have our group leaders and our region directors that all kind of sit at that same level, that report up to either Jason or Terry. We will start next week. We will have some conversations with folks looking for, is there a likely candidate to move into this EM4 position. How long that takes, I don't know. And based on wherever that person comes from, that could leave a hole that we have to fill. Basically, anything from an engineer manager 3 up is an appointed position. So I have to make that appointment. Obviously, the person who they report to is very key to making that decision. So anything below an engineer manager 3 is a merit position and goes through the normal HR hiring process. So I'd give Brian a few minutes to, if give his tell us what he thinks, or Brian, this is your opportunity of fame.
Well, thank you, Carlos. I appreciate it. I'll try not to get emotional, because this is definitely a tough decision for me. And I'm so grateful for the experience and the opportunity that I've had of working with UDOT. It's amazing place. And one of the funnest parts of my job was always working with the commission. And I wanted to tell you guys how much I appreciate the kindness that you've shared with me, all your friendship, and the trust that you've had in me. And you guys are amazing people, and I've just truly appreciated, getting to know you, and just the experience of working with you. I've learned a lot, and I'll cherish that forever. So I just want to say thank you to all of you. And I'm not going far, so if anybody ever needs anything, I still have my same number, and I'll, so please reach out to me. And then I just want to say, that you're going to be in good hands with Lisa taking over my position. If she'll do a better job than I've done, and so Region 2 will be in good hands. And want to congratulate Rob for taking over Region 1. He's going to do an amazing job there too. So you're in good hands. But again, I appreciate everything you guys have done for me, and you'll always be great friends. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Nagi or any of the commissioners, anything you'd like to harass them?
Your announcements really make me sad, and I wish that you could change your mind. I wish you could talk to Carrie and see if she won't change your mind. On behalf of the commission, for all of us, we just want to tell you that we love you. We have enjoyed working with you. You've been a great asset, great friend. And just like you mentioned, we are here for you too. Whenever you need us, whenever you need to have a council shoulder to cry on, or any kind of a shoulder to celebrate with you, we would like to make sure that we will be with you all the time, and wish you good luck and success. And welcome, Lisa. Welcome back, Lisa. And welcome aboard, Rob. Congratulations. Thank you. Rob. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Nagi.
Nagi, I'd like to say something, if that's okay.
Please. Go ahead.
Brian, I've just loved working with you for this brief time, and I just want to wish you well. I'm just mindful of what public service is and the calling of public service. And when I saw you in action, and then I see the way that you express your affection, your appreciation for the friendship, the trust, the kindness, that's a real credit to your service. And so thank you so much. And I'm just grateful for you and your public service. And Lisa, I'm looking forward to working with you in Region 2.
Thanks, Natalie.
Mr. Chairman, this is Lou. If I might say also how much I appreciate Brian, and no matter how tough things got, Brian always had a smile and the right approach. And Carlos, I don't know why you let these like 31-year-old guys retire. They're not nearly old enough for that. We set them loose on society. But I echo my deep appreciation for your public service, and Natalie, who's done so much of it herself, and many of us also know that it's one of the highest honors we can have. And, when I need a snowplow, I'm going to give you a call. I figured nobody got snowplows better going than Brian. So great to work with Lisa and Rob. And there are no goodbyes in this business. And you haven't said yet where you're going. I don't know if you can do that yet. But whoever's getting you is getting a great deal. So anyway, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lou. I'm gonna go work for HDR, so I'll be close to your office. So I'm expecting lunch every once in a while.
Absolutely, absolutely, and breakfast.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm going to call my broker and go buy stock in HDR right now.
See, Lou, he can actually say that now that he's going to the private sector. He couldn't do that before as a UDOT.
What a great blessing for all of us. That we have such a deep bench too, and Lisa and Rob and all. It's just, and you know, I just feel for Carlos having to shuffle all these times, but there's been such wonderful development, marvelous background, and as I say, the deepest bench around. I'm just so proud of everybody. So thank you.
Forget about the snowplow. I don't need a snowplow in southern Utah. I need a motorhome and the boat to go on the Lake Powell, right?
I'll definitely take you up for that one, Nagi.
Okay.
Hey, Brian, this is Jim Evans. I just want to say from the very first time that you took a few minutes with me, nothing but kindness, and in terms of just making sure I felt welcome into the commission, and so I just want to thank you for that. Wish you well personally as well.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. So, Brian, thank you. And you still have a couple more weeks to go here, so keep running hard. Jason might not sign that final release form. Okay.
I have that option?
No, actually, no. But Nagi or any of the commissioners, before we jump into the first agenda item, are there any items that you would like to discuss or questions that you have on any subject?
I don't have it. Any other commissioners, if you'd like to have anything, please, Lou.
Well, just one final reminder before you leave, Brian, that any new highway signage that you can put on the schedule going forward is highly appreciated, particularly since your office and my office are right near exit 6 on I-215. So I wouldn't want you to feel bad every day when you go to work. So thank you for looking forward for us on signage.
Yeah, and hope I'm happy to report, Lou, that that project advertises in the next week or two. So the goal is to get it up before snow flies.
Yeah, so you'll know which exit to get off at when you go to HDR. So, great. Thank you very much. That is important. On a serious note, for tourist season, and we know what budgets are like, but it really does make a difference for the broader public to know that we're serious about our highway signage. So thank you very much, all.
Anything else?
I think we're set.
Okay. And you guys can call me for anything if you need to. Ben, are you going to be taking the lead on this?
Yeah, I will have Ivan bring up the presentation and I'll get us kicked off here.
It's all yours.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So today we're going to go over a continuation of what we started last month in the annual review of the prioritization process. I'm just going to give a little bit of background information at the beginning here, and then I'll turn the time over to Richard Brockmeyer from our planning division to go over some of the comments and model discussions that were had during this past time period. So on the next slide, this is just the background information that we went over last month, the link to the administrative rule, which addresses the requirement for the annual review of the prioritization process and the aspect of comment and public input of that review. We had a link here to the prioritization process webpage, which contains all the relevant information and the documents that are related to the prioritization process. And then the last thing on this page, there's a link to all of the comments that we received through both the listening meetings and any written comments that were received through this review. So on the next slide, this is very similar to the one that we showed last month, and this was just the path forward for this review and update schedule. Richard did go in and update the listening meetings, both internal stakeholder and external stakeholder listening meetings, with the dates and a brief description on what they were about that happened June, July, and August during this past time period. So what you'll see in August, the goal of this month is to present the public comments to the commission. Like I said, both the ones that we got through the listening meetings and any written comments. Going forward from here, September would be for recommendations on process updates. So we use those comments to guide those recommendations. I think I mentioned this last month, but kind of looking at those two different ways, those comments and how they would guide the recommendations. One being something that we could potentially recommend for implementation for this year, and then, you know, another category for some longer term goals for the process. And that would set, that September recommendation for process updates would set us up for a request for approval of those process updates in October. So that was kind of the high level run through of the schedule and path forward. Is there any questions with that before I turn the time over to Richard to go through some of those comments and summarize everything that happened in the last few months? Great. Well, I'll turn the time over to Richard, and you can go through the themes and comments and some of the model discussions that happened over the last few months.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to go over the first sort of more the general process comments. So when we met in the listening meetings internally and externally, we tried to sort of look at things more generally, process, you know, what were the process comments, and then each individual model. And we'll go over all of these, but these are sort of the themes that we heard the most throughout that process on sort of general concepts to be thinking about. So the first one is starting with a list of transit and active projects from the Unified Plan. This is similar to what we do right now with the highway process, where we start with the fiscally constrained phase 1 projects, and we prioritize that whole list. And certainly there's a component of, you know, projects can be nominated to the commission for consideration, but we have a list that we start with. And that was the suggestion that we heard in that comment, is there are projects listed in the Unified Plan for capital transit projects. Could we start with that list? Similarly, there's active transportation projects that are listed in the Unified Plan or in other active transportation plans. Does it make sense to, again, start with a list? Of course, even with that, we'd still need to, you know, work with local governments and communities on whether they could provide that 40% match, which is a code requirement. And certainly nominations, you know, would still be allowed. But that was the suggestion, is there has been a lot of work through the Unified Plan process and other processes, and maybe starting with a list so that people can get an idea of how things are scoring, and that might generate more support for putting the 40% match forward. The next suggestion was there's some concern about having duplicate projects in the TIF active and TTIF first last mile categories. So this last go around, we had a number of projects that were submitted for both, for consideration for both those funding sources. Oh, and Linda, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. The 40% match is soft. It doesn't necessarily have to be a cash contribution. The idea with this second comment really was those really are separate things, and a project should decide which one the primary purpose is. If it's an active transportation project that has utility just on its own, it should be submitted for active transportation. And if it's a TTIF project that really is about, the focus of the project is about improving access to transit, that really should only be submitted for that fund. So that was the suggestion, is, you know, don't allow, just because an active transportation project happens to go by a bus stop or a rail stop, unless the primary purpose of that project is to improve access to the transit model or to the transit system, it really shouldn't be submitted for both. The other comment we heard a lot was that the time period for nominations was too short. And I think we went over the last time we met, sort of the idea of trying to make that process a little longer. We opened up nominations just before Thanksgiving. And in the case of highway nominations, those were due, I think, sometime in December. And they were due for the TIF active and TTIF like at the very beginning of January. And so there was some thought that it would be really nice to have a little bit more time to develop the nominations, so communities have a little bit more time to put that together. And then the last one is the 40% match requirement for the TIF active and TTIF. That was seen as an obstacle. We heard that pretty much in every meeting that we held. Again, this is a code requirement. It is a soft match, so it could be in kind, it could be, it doesn't have to be cash in hand, but it has to be non-state. But that was definitely seen as a barrier for a lot of people. So next slide. So now we'll get into more of some of the specific comments on the models themselves, but just as a refresher, I know I always, I'm looking at this every day, so I always remember it, but just to make sure everybody remembers, we're using this multimodal framework with the Utah's transportation vision, UVision, outcome areas focused on quality of life at sort of the center of good health, strong economy, better mobility, and connected communities. And under that, we have criteria under each one of those that stay consistent through all the models. So we're always looking at safety or throughput, no matter what we're talking, which model we're talking about, but the way we measure it might be different. So just again, a reminder of the overall framework. Next slide. So this is the TIF highway model as it exists today. So you can see the UVision outcome areas at the top. The weighting of those are consistent across all the models, and that was from discussions that the workshop that we had where we did the decision lens exercise last year to develop those. And then under that you have the criteria, and you can see the individual measures of what data set is being used and how that is weighted. So this is sort of the bulk of our listening sessions, not only on the process, but specifically the nuts and bolts of the way that we're scoring, the data sets that we're using, those kinds of things. That's what we were asking to hear, what was working, what was not working, and getting that feedback. So next slide, I'll go over some of the themes we heard on the highway model. So we heard a lot that the measures seem to be pretty urban centric. A lot of the measures were focused on employment and population, and there was definitely a feeling that the way that those were scored and the data sets that were used seemed to really focus in on urban areas and didn't seem to take into account some things in the rural setting. Projects that create a new facility, there was some thought that they were at a disadvantage because a lot of the measures that we're looking at are based on existing conditions, especially the mobility measures of existing volume, existing delay, those kinds of things. We do have a methodology for sort of using averages and things like that, so it's not just a zero that those new projects would get. But there was definitely a thought that was something that needed to be explored more on how that's done, and if there's other measures that could be used, because they definitely felt like we weren't getting the full benefit of what that project would do, which sort of goes into the next theme of focusing in on outcomes. And I think we've talked about this from the outset, that it's much better to talk about what the project does and measure what the project does as opposed to what the existing conditions and the needs are. So continuing to find places where we can improve on using outcome measures as opposed to existing conditions. Really talking about what the project does to improve that condition. We heard a lot about the data needing to be more public, and there's more time needed for review, especially from the regions. Certainly, making the data sets, we have that lengthy, in-depth documentation, but also trying to make some of that data, put that up on UPlan, those kinds of things so that people can go and see and look at it. Trying to improve our scorecard so it's easier to follow how projects are scored, and then giving sufficient time to review data, make sure there's not any issues. I think what we learned a lot is that just sitting down and walking through things with people, because it's complex, and that's sort of the next theme. Is it is a complex model. It's much more complex than it used to be. We've always tried to balance complexity with trying to make something that differentiates projects. But having time to really understand the data and make that easy for people to understand was a concern.
Richard?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to interrupt. You used the term UPlan. Would you, maybe the commissioners are not familiar with that? Yeah,
UPlan is our sort of the central repository of GIS data for the department. So any data set, you can get things like AADT, so the existing volume. A lot of the measures we're using are already up on UPlan, so that anybody, even people outside of the agency, can look at the data, actually get a web map and look at the data, download it if they want. And that's sort of the thought, is trying to make more of the data sets that we're using, or all of the data sets that we're using, available through that platform. So I think what we'd like to do now is maybe just hear, are there questions or comments on the feedback that we've gotten, or are there feedback or thoughts you have on the model that's itself, and we can go back to the previous slide and talk about those.
Thank you for that explanation. It was very comprehensive.
Okay. And again, I think just as I go through this, if there are any questions or comments that come up based on the feedback or what what's currently in the model, just feel free to interrupt me at any time. But we can move on if you'd like to the next slide, which is what the existing Tiff active model looks like. And again, the weights at the top and the UVision outcome areas are the same throughout all the models. You can see there might be some slight differences in the weighting in the criteria specific to that model. And then certainly the measures have changed, right? And so, for example, with good health under safety, we're looking at non-motorized crash trends specifically in project safety component, whereas in the highway model, we were looking at some other measures. And so just to, again, we really, on these listening meetings, tried to focus in on the measures that we're using all the way down to that level. I think we talked a lot about process and globally, and then sort of worked our way all the way down to these specific measures. So the next slide goes into what we heard, the sort of the common themes. You want to click over, Ivan? Thanks. So again, I think we heard that there was definitely a thought that the measures seem to be very urban-centric. That the way the scoring was done, it seemed to make more urban projects in more urban settings prioritize higher. These next two are a little bit more technical, so I'll try and give you some background, and certainly if I don't explain something, chime in if you don't understand what I'm talking about. But the first one is really about the air quality measure that we're using under good health. The way that the model currently works is we were giving sort of points to areas that are considered non-attainment, and that's a certain threshold that for certain pollutants, the EPA has designated that area as being not an attainment, not up to the standard, the national standard. And so there's a boundary, and that's where we've said, you know, projects that are in a non-attainment area get additional points. The thought was that we heard a lot was that there's a lot of areas that are not quite yet in non-attainment, but they're starting to approach that. And should we be prioritizing those areas, putting more investment for active transportation in this case, in those areas to keep them from reaching that threshold? And so that was definitely a comment we heard a few times, that that maybe we should consider doing that, changing the way that the scoring is done. Because right now it's very, you know, yes, no, 0 or 1 point, you're in a non-attainment zone or you're not. So maybe changing that structure. The last comment was focused on the measure we're using for throughput. And probably some of you know what Strava is, but just to give another background on that data set, this is sort of an application that people opt into. We purchased this data on like a 5-year contract, I think, where we get access to data that people submit. Basically, they opt into using this. It's essentially an exercise tracker, tracking active transportation, walking, biking, and they can use their mobile phone. They can upload GPS data onto a computer to sort of track their utilization. There was some concern with using that data set or overusing that data set because it might be missing a larger percent of the population, right? Because it's something that people opt into, something that's really used by avid recreation users. And then they're making some structural changes in their business model in the future that could impact that even more, putting more of their application behind a paywall. That there was some concern that that might even make that concern even greater in the future. So thinking about some alternative measures or additional measures to include with that so that we're getting a greater sense of the general population.
Question?
Mm-hmm.
What does that acronym actually stand for?
That is a great question that I don't know.
I'm guessing it's State Transportation Research. I'm not sure what AVA is.
No, I don't know. It's not affiliated with the state. So this is a private company that collects this data basically, and then we purchase the data.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So are there any other questions, thoughts, feedback that you might have on considerations on measures or criteria that we're using?
So I just Googled Strava, and fun fact, it says it's Swedish for strive, which epitomizes our attitude and ambition. So I think it's probably a company name that they came up with based on that. So that's your fun fact for the day.
Okay, we can move on to the next, getting into more the TTIF realm. So this is the TTIF transit model. It's going to look very similar again in terms of the structure, but you can see again that the measures are different. So for example, throughput, we're looking at system ridership increase. We have a safety component index. So again, we really tried to focus in and really get down from comments all the way at the top, all the way to the bottom of individual data sets. Next slide. So this is what we heard, and it's going to seem pretty similar, but some are specific to the transit model. Again, there's definitely a feeling that the measures were urban-centric, especially the way they were being scored. That same comment about air quality, we got that about the TTIF transit as well, that making an investment in transit in those areas that are not quite at that threshold, but are starting to have air quality issues, might keep an area from reaching that threshold. The safety measure was unclear for a lot of people, and we sort of had this safety component index, and I think this might be an area where there could be improvements to just the documentation and explaining things a little bit more. But basically, we were scoring things on what the project does. So this is sort of an outcome measure, but maybe clarifying how we're scoring it and what counts and what doesn't count. Does a transit project include crash avoidance systems, positive train control? Does it include facility safety, security enhancements, security systems, cameras? Does it improve asset conditions or improvements that reduce risk of accidents? And we sort of put that on a 1 to 10 scale, or a 0 to 10 scale. And there was definitely some comments related to it was a little unclear what counted and for how many points. So I think that was definitely something that we heard that was very specific to that measure. And then we certainly heard the same thing that we heard on the highway model, which is rather than focusing in on the need or the existing conditions, what is the outcome of the project? So trying as much as we can to move towards an outcome of what the project does. Any questions on those? Or additional thoughts on the model itself? Okay. So we can move to the last one, which is also TTIF, but this is the first last mile. This is actually going to look very similar to the active transportation model, almost identical with just a few slight changes to really focus in on measuring its impact on the access to transit. So for example, throughput, we're looking at the ridership of the transit stations served. But other than that, it's very similar to active transportation in terms of how we're scoring and what measures we're using. Next slide. These are going to look really similar again. These were themes that we heard sort of throughout, that it was very urban centric in terms of the measures that we're using. The same issue of air quality, of considering changing how we're scoring that. And then more specifically to these models, there was a thought that right now we're providing points that to projects that improve connections to BRT and fixed rail stations in the connected communities area, and trying to think about, does it improve access to just good bus service? Because that's also important. So maybe think about it more in terms of service level. If you're improving access to a bus stop that has 15-minute service, that's just as good as improving access to a 15-minute rail service. So that was the comment there. And then there was some thought that maybe we should be adding additional points for connections to no fare transit systems. I think the thought with that was that maybe you'd get a bigger bang for your buck by improving access to those systems, because you already have that removal of the barrier of the fee to use the transit system. And so if you improve access to it, you might see a bigger increase in utilization. Any questions, comments on the TTIF first last mile?
Yes, Richard. Now that you have received all the comments for all these categories, what is the next step?
You set me up perfectly. If you want to go to the next slide, Ivan. Right now what we're trying to do is go through all the comments we've collected, everything that we've heard, even though the written letters that we've received, just what we heard in those meetings that didn't necessarily make it into a written comment. Sorry, Ivan, can you go to the next slide? And we're really going through and as Ben sort of mentioned, categorizing of, what are things that we think we want to try and address right away, changes and tweaks that we can make right away to any of the models. And then bringing those to you next month. What modifications would need to be made to the documentation, what modifications might need to be made to the administrative rule based on some of the process comments we heard. And then there's also some other comments that might fit into a longer term strategy of maybe we don't think we can do that right away, or maybe we think we need to test that out to better understand the implications of that, but continue to work on those comments that we've heard. So I think short term, bringing something for you all to consider in terms of recommendations to change right away next month. And then we'll continue to work on the other comments that we've heard to see what are things that we can do maybe in the next year or two to improve the model.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
So Richard, when are the next round of nominations due?
We haven't set a specific date. I think the intent, and I'm trying to remember the last schedule we showed where we sort of said, this is what things were last time and this is what we're expecting this next go around. Assuming that, there's approval of the updates by October, the thought would be that we try and open up the nominations in October. And have basically an additional month for people to be able to put in those nominations.
So I just wanted to make sure that it's not that we don't want to make all the good changes that could be made. There's a limited amount of time before that next round of nominations is due, and so we're going to have to try to categorize, as Richard said, which things are things we can reasonably do in the next couple of months, and then which things are maybe a little more aspirational and may take us a little bit longer to get to. So some of those will have to wait till that next update of the model next year.
Ben?
So, yeah, thank you. I think that I'll just add, so tomorrow the plan would be that we would do a little bit even higher level description of the comments received. I'll just go through some of the similar background information and show this schedule again tomorrow, but then Eileen would help us go through the summary of the comments like she does so well, consistent with some of the other comment period reporting that is going to happen tomorrow. So I guess, is there any questions on that? We'd have the same link to all the comments, and then she would go over a summary.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Anything else?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Richard, as always, great job. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Commissioners, I don't know if you want to have a conversation about that, or if you're good and if you want to dwell on it, give any of us a call. We can have as detailed a conversation as you'd like as we move forward.
Hey, Carlos, this is Jim.
Yes.
Hopefully these two gentlemen and Terry, they know that it's not silence. Silence means that we've seen it a lot. We understand it. I think that would be a compliment that you've gotten to us to the point where I think we feel good about what you're doing right now. And of course, we want to see the comments and tweak the changes, but I just, me for one, I'm sure the others too, we appreciate your work on this, and it's a great process you've got for this initial round as we look at this. So thank you.
Well, Jim, thank you for saying that. And I know it's, we don't want to put you guys on a spot. I like to think that our goal should be to that this has become boring as hell to everyone, because that means you've seen it, and that's what we need to do, is we need to just keep going through this and giving those opportunities. So thank you for that, Jim. Nagi, if you're ready, do you want to take a little commission tour? I think you're on mute, but I'll take that as an okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. Jason, what are you guys doing out there? You got any projects under construction? Jason, take yourself off mute.
I first want to just agree with my boss. That was boring as hell, because Terry and her team have done such a great job of explaining it to us. And, you know, it's always good to get the refresher and remind ourselves. But, you know, they go through all that hard work of prioritizing, and then they work with the commission and they fund them. And then I really don't do a whole heck of a lot, but I get to turn them over to the regions. And this is what happens. This is the magic that happens once you give us some money and we get going. And so Elizabeth and the team of public relation folks at the regions went and put something together very, very quickly, I may add. So I know they wanted to do a little bit more refinement on this, but they hit the deadline and got it done. And so, Ivan, go ahead and hit play.
Yeah, and while they're doing that, we really just took the existing materials that were developed for, you know, public involvement on these individual projects.
So, Carlos, I'm sure that I don't know if everyone's was kind of lagging, kind of like the record player was a little bit slow. I was able to watch it prior to, and it's still amazing. You look at some of those projects, the Tech Corridor, Mountain View, the Ped Bridge. It's kind of like planting a seed in a garden, and there was nothing there but this bare slate, this soil without really anything there. And then you watch these projects grow, and there's an interchange, and there's a ped bridge, and there's a bike path. And it really is amazing when you get to see these type of pictures in a very quick scenario like that. And I don't know about the rest of you, but it makes me really proud to be part of UDOT and see what is accomplished and the product that we provide to the public, and what a benefit what we do. And I think earlier on when we were talking about Brian and public service, we didn't build any of those projects for profit. Not one of us here, did those projects for profit. It's really about public service and, seeing what's getting accomplished out there with all the challenges the country's going through and the world's going through. It really does kind of just make you step back and realize what's being accomplished and being done. So appreciate what everyone's done. Appreciate our crews and our contractors out there. And that's what we got for today, Carlos.
Thanks, Jason. So there was probably, 10 or so projects that were highlighted there. There's probably, at least tomorrow, since Chris Peterson is out of town, I think it's Fred Daring is going to give the project update tomorrow to the commission, but there's probably around 150, 160 active construction jobs. So this was just a little bit of a sampling of some of the jobs, obviously probably some of the bigger ones. But commissioners, do you have any questions on any of those projects? I know it was fast, and at least on my end, it was a little jerky. And I think I saw Grants put a link to the presentation in the chat, so that might run better. But any questions on any projects that are going on?
The video looks fine and dandy, but we need to have a snack and water to go with it.
Yeah, we should have delivered.
What was the treat of the tour was?
Lou?
Mr. Chairman, I just think it was awesome and so proud of it. And in commercial real estate, we say it, with a drone, it always looks a little better from a little higher up, but it gives you the perspective. And the one, I don't know if I was seeing it right, on Tooele, that one stretch looked like a big semi was trying to do a U-turn right there in the middle of the road. And anyway, the music, we all are old enough to remember On the Road Again. We could jazz up with music, but I'm just delighted. I mean, anyone running for governor ought to have that shown. Anybody running at EDC Utah pushing the site selections ought to have that shown. I'm going to, the next time I hear a complaint about I-15 in Utah County, I'm going to show it. I'm just delighted by that. And aren't we proud to be Utahns? We're on the move again. And so Natalie, who always does these presentations so well, I hope that you'll incorporate that in some of your statewide endorsements. So anyway, kudos to all.
Happy to do that, Lou. I copied the YouTube link because it is impressive. Mr. Chair and Carlos, what comes to my mind is I just really want to put a COVID-19 touch on this. Like, has any of this been slowed down because of COVID? Has any of it been accelerated because of COVID? Are you having problems on the job sites? I mention that because right now in our state, construction is growing at 8.7% job growth. It's the only industry growing over 1%, and it's fastest growing at 8.7. And just to remind you, the state as a whole is contracting by about 3%, and industries like leisure and hospitality are contracting by 21%. So anyway, I would love to just hear comment on that kind of presentation vis-a-vis the other macro data.
Yeah, I mean, so Natalie, when the COVID hit and we saw traffic drop significantly, so we saw traffic drop in 40, 50% in some places. And what we do on a lot of our construction jobs, especially in the urbanized area, we either do what we call lane rental. So we charge a higher fee based on the number of traffic, for a contractor to take away a lane, or we don't allow them to take lanes during certain periods of time. So we opened up that, we gave them more flexibility. So with less traffic, we were able to maybe extend those work periods for them. And we know that helped them. I don't have a measure on how that helped any individual project, but collectively it did help them. Now the contractors have been having, I'll say they've been managing it really well, first of all, let me just say that. They've all been, required and have wanted to implement safety, unique safety plans for every construction job. And those construction jobs, it's all around, how big a group can get together, what they do in terms of interacting with each other, the use of equipment, the cleaning of equipment. Sometimes, only one individual would be in a grader when maybe they might change it out, typically. So they've been really good about that. But we've had projects where we've had crews come down and test positive, which has required, the shutdown of a crew. We had a project up in Region 1 where one of the bridge crews all needed to stand down for, I think it was a week. So we've had cases throughout the state, but they've all been really managed well and have not had a significant impact on any schedules. There has been some challenges with some availability of products. I could tell you that, bridge beams, concrete bridge beams. That wasn't really COVID related originally. We had our one bridge beam maker in the state of Utah shut down to change and do some work on their facility. And so we scrambled and actually had to send an individual to Arizona during the height of this to certify another casting company for us to be able to get those bridge beams. And it had a little bit of an impact on some of our project schedules to get those bridge beams. Jason, do you have anything more specific on that? I mean, we're going to hit the scheduled dates on, technology quarter will be done, before the end of this calendar year. Nod your head, Rob.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a thumbs up. I know that's a project that a lot of people think have been going on forever, and we've been doing construction there a long time. But Jason, anything else on that?
So the only other challenges that we've really faced from a schedule standpoint is some of these groups we have to get agreements out of. And so they've been stretched on their resources as well. And so some of those agreements have slowed down our ability to kind of dot the I's, cross the T's. But as far as the construction industry itself, kudos to them. They've really done a really, really good job of figuring out ways to meet our demands, or I guess not our demands, to meet what the market has out there. And so yeah, they've done some great things for us, and it's really a credit to them.
And Natalie, you kind of hit it right on the nail when you talked about the growth in the construction industry. We have not seen a drop in prices. We continue to see construction costs increase in the 4 to 5% range. And I don't anticipate that changing here in the near future. We still have we have a large program. You will start to see the airport taper down here quite a bit, which is a really big construction project. But we continue to have a very strong program. I don't know if there's Nagi or anyone else, if there's any other questions on any subject, but that's we considered not having a staff update because it was really just that one item on the prioritization, but we think so important that we have that process be deliberate on that we wanted to spend some time on that. So
Carlos, with your permission, I would like to ask Terry and Jason talk about their experiences with other two states. They had a college trip recently. I would like to have their personal observation for what they saw, the traffic, the roadways, the bridges of those two states, one from Montana next door and the one from the East Coast, South Carolina. Terry?
Yeah, both Terry and Jason this last week have gone through the process of bringing their oldest child to their first year of college. So Jason, you went up to Montana State, so you got back sooner. What was it like?
Well, so my trip was through West Yellowstone and a lot of these recreation areas, and I think it's the same we're seeing nationally. Of there is nothing more, amazing than to see all these people out recreating. It is. I hear the tourism industry and everything suffering, but when I see all these people and the long lines of cars and everything, it's pretty amazing what's going on. And there's construction, ran into construction. I went through 2 states. I won't say which state, but I am definitely proud of how our state handles keeping the road open and traffic flowing during our construction, because not every state does the same thing. And so, our designers, our contractors have figured out ways to build our projects and really do a good job of keeping traffic flowing. You look at Tech Corridor, we actually had one more lane of traffic each direction during construction than we did before construction started. And so not every state goes to that effort to try to accommodate the traveling public during that. So I was very pleasantly happy to see that the economy is obviously still, people are spending money, but not to the rate obviously that it could be. But there's a lot of people out there in the outdoors, and in Montana and Idaho, they haven't stopped recreating, that's for sure.
Wow. So which university did you drop your child?
Montana State in Bozeman.
Bozeman, okay.
Beautiful town. I go up there on vacation almost every year and go fly fishing. And I always told my son, hey, you should come up here and go to school. And I didn't think he was listening. So
it's a good place to be. I've been there. Terry, you have the call.
Well, when you first called on me, I was just not paying attention completely because my son was just texting me that I just dropped off. So I guess I hit a little bit of a lot of different modes on my trip. We flew, which was, I had not flown for quite some time. And we specifically chose Delta to fly on because we knew they weren't filling all the seats, and we thought they were pretty hardcore in their policies about masks. But unfortunately, I had a couple of flights where people sitting across the aisle from me didn't feel like they needed to wear their masks, and nobody called them on it. So that was a little bit concerning, which anyway, 4 flights later, and a lot of time in airports, and I don't know, 10, 12 hours straight of wearing a mask. And I'm glad to be home and not have a mask on for a little bit. But we spent a little time in Greenville, South Carolina, and got to experience some, they've done a lot of nice things along their trails. They actually have developments and restaurants that face them and are kind of engaged with their active transportation, and stopped at some really unique places that in terms of how they did their land use and really focused some of their efforts. There were some really cool things there. And then we also rented a car and drove, and that was pretty seamless. Nothing was too busy. And then got my son dropped off at school at Furman University. So anyway, got back late last night and glad to be back home again, but something is missing here. So anyway, everybody else that's experienced that is just kind of laughing right now, but all in all, good trip.
Thank you. Thank you both. Any other question from the commissioners? Anyone that before tomorrow?
Any
This is
questions?
Wayne, I'd just like to make a comment.
Go ahead, please.
I want to congratulate Brian and Lisa, and I'm looking forward to working with Rob White in Region 1.
Good. Thank you, Wayne. Now, again, I don't know if the commissioners had any questions on any items on the agenda for tomorrow.
Yeah, floor is open. Anyone, if you have a question.
Mr. Chairman, this is Lou. We had to have this meeting to say goodbye to Brian and welcome Lisa and Rob to their new jobs. That's part of it, of course. I was in Coeur d'Alene on vacation and also down in Arizona, and was very careful. My wife's tired of hearing me comment on the road deficiencies compared to ours. But I have been going through some old, trying to get my personal history together from 1972, the year I had an internship that summer at the Arizona Highway Department. I have to show you how primitive is the only word I can say it was in 1972. So none of you were born then, but I was trying to keep Arizona Highway Department going, and obviously they've done a little better since then. My other point, though, is there's been a lot of discussion. There's a pending RFP out for, or an application out for a facilitator for public-private partnerships. We've talked a bit over the years with Terry and Carlos and now with Lyle McMillan about some of the things on that. There's some very strong candidates on that. We've been talking to some of the legislators about it. I have, because of my World Trade Center and the international investors who want to come and all. But UDOT is a prime opportunity and source for some real innovative international investment and public-private partnerships, unlike anything we've ever seen before. So we've also talked to some of the banks and all. So that's something that's on my mind as we look at the long-term going forward. Not for an agenda, but simply as something that I think UDOT can again lead in so many ways. So, an end of intervention. Thank you.
Yeah, that RFP that Lou's referring to is being advertised out of the Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, well, that's all we got. We can give you back an hour of your day.
Well, thank you, Carlos. Thank you, the presenters. Commissioners, we shall see you tomorrow, 8:30. And if you want to plug in maybe 5 or 6 minutes early to make sure that all the glitches of your videos, audio has been tested. Otherwise, have a good rest and show up tomorrow with the smiley faces. We're going to have a good time tomorrow.
We will.
Thank you.
Thank you, my friends. Have a wonderful day. See you tomorrow.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Yeah.